Okay, got it.
Hey,
Yeah.
everybody. I am so happy to welcome Stuart Elliott, who's come to share his life experience with us and to tell you a bit about his adventures and where he's come from, and currently is. Stuart, welcome to the Mindset Alchemy podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful to be here, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you. I mean, it's one of those special occasions. So, thank you very much for inviting me and for inviting your audience to hear.
Oh, no, thank you. You have so much value and valuable things to offer people. Stuart, I am fascinated. Please tell everyone where you currently are. Before we came online, Stuart was telling me about the temperature of where he is. And I'm currently freezing at the moment. So I was quite, I wouldn't say envious. Where are you, Stuart, now?
Yeah, well, South Africa is in the southern hemisphere, so you are hitting midwinter soon, which is
Very soon.
interesting. Yeah, but I'm in the northern hemisphere in the corresponding tropic. I can't remember which is Capricorn and which is Cancer, but
You are in Cancer and I am
okay,
below Capricorn, way
okay.
below Capricorn.
Yeah, so I'm around there, and basically I'm coming to you from the south of China, and obviously because of the tropics and it is the rainy season, we've got high humidity, but it's also in the region of 39, 40 degrees at the moment during the daytime, and it's 10:35 now, and it's still 33 outside, so it's beautiful to just go for a nice little stroll, and that's centigrade, not Fahrenheit.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good point to tell people. I remember when I was in Townsville in Australia many, many, many years ago, I experienced that sort of tropical sensation. It was absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Stuart, you have had a fascinating journey to get there. Can you share with us a little bit of where you started, how you wound up in South Africa, what you initially went to China for, and where it led to?
Yeah, well, I mean, it started quite a few years ago in the UK, and I lived most of the life. I mean, about 6 months after I was born, my parents moved from London to Manchester, and lived most of my life in a little bit in the south, but mostly in the north of Manchester, in a place called Middleton. And then back in around 84, well, before that, actually, a couple of years before that, I started to develop an interest in Africa, and I bought a book on, it could have been through a newspaper because that was back before Amazon started. And it was an online, thing. You buy it and you got it. But it was about West Africa and the kingdoms and the history of the peoples there. And I found it absolutely fascinating. So that really was, I don't know about my awakening, but the first connection I actually experienced to Africa. And I do have a very big connection there. So when my brother moved to Joburg to work with one of the banks, in 84, 85, he was getting towards the end of his contract and said, hey, I'm going to organize an overland trip through Africa, in my Land Rover. So I said, okay, I'm interested. But, my brother, unfortunately, doesn't always have the best calendar in his mind. So it didn't pan out. And to be open with you, it may not have been the best option anyway, because if we spend too much time together in a very close proximity, we have quite a few arguments. So maybe it was
I
a
love
good thing.
it.
Yeah. But
So Mother
but
Nature was taking care of that for you, was she?
yeah, it seems like that. Yes, and so I still wanted to do this overland trip through Africa, so I organised something, and then in January, yeah, I think it was the end of January '86, I flew to South Africa, spent some time with my brother, obviously, and then toured around South Africa, and then a month later, I was due to start the overland trip back to the UK, and that was about a 6 month journey.
Sure.
And that was a phenomenal experience. I mean, we drove at that time, obviously, Zimbabwe was still in a little bit of turmoil, so you couldn't go to Zimbabwe because of the troubles in Matabeleland and that. But we went through Botswana and then to Zambia, to
Beautiful.
Malawi, to Tanzania, to Kenya, to Burundi, Central African Republic, Zaire, Nigeria, and all the way back to the UK. But obviously at a trip like that, you have so many phenomenal experiences, quite a lot of them, which don't really register. The importance of them don't really register at the time, but they're there in your mind until, you're ready to receive the message or the lesson that was given you. And it was interesting. I've never really been outside of the UK apart from I went to 2 weeks in Morocco once and not Spain, Greece. But that was really it. It was only on little package holidays, but they were a good taste of it. The first couple of nights camping in the Kalahari Desert, that was phenomenal because the thing that stands out to me is the number of stars. It was incredible. I mean, we were walking down around with our heads down and our shoulders down because we thought the stars were going to clap us on the head because it was so many and it's just so beautiful. I've never
Beautiful.
seen that. It was a beautiful experience. And obviously, especially if you go further north in the Kalahari, get towards the Okavango, then there's no fences for the game. They have the what's it called, the foot and mouth barrier to separate the cattle areas from there, but there's no fences in the game reserves or anything. And we're camping, and we have liners visiting at night time, sniffing around the tent, and that's interesting. At first, it's scary as heck, but afterwards, it becomes part and parcel of the thing. We never had an experience like some people we met who they were camping there. Some elephants came through as they were camping, and one of them peed on their tent. Now, elephants are big. They have a lot of water in them. You can imagine what they felt like when they're being swamped. And there's not a lot you can do in that situation.
Oh my word. And let's add, you normally carry all your own water in these areas. It's not readily available. I don't know if you were.
Water, spares, everything you need. You have to be self-sufficient. And that's the thing. And this is back in '86. So we didn't even have GPSs or anything. It was a paper map, which I like, and a compass. And follow your nose and trust. And we were on an organized tour. But when I came back, and I'll get to how I came back and what happened there. But when I came back, I spent as much time as possible in my own 4x4 in those areas because it's special about it. And yeah, we loaded up the whole thing with everything: spare alternators, spare water pumps, as many spares as you can take with you without having to have a whole complete vehicle towed behind you. And then obviously fuel. I mean, when you're in the deep sands, they chew fuel like anything else. And then obviously water and food, etc., etc. So you have to become self-sufficient, but it's not a big challenge, really, if you think about it. And it's fun if you like it. I remember, the contrast once when my parents came to visit and we took them into, now Zimbabwe's okay again, we took them into the north in the Matupo Hills or whatever, and I can't remember the game reserve there now, but I found this place on the map in the game reserve I wanted to get to. And we're driving 3 hours later, we're still driving, we've not seen a single person, we've not seen a single vehicle, and my mother is starting to panic.
Shame.
She's so far away from any form of civilization, she made me turn around and go back.
Oh,
But,
did you warn her about it?
I did, but warning and actually experiencing are not always the same thing.
Yeah, it's the vastness and the stillness that is so.
Yeah, and just the emptiness, if you think of it, because there's no living souls. There's nothing. I mean, there's animals and things, but there's no dwellings or anything else like that. And if you're a little bit nervous about that, it can be a challenge. And it was. So obviously we turned back and it was a little bit relieved.
And from there, how did you get to China? That is fascinating, people.
Well, what happened was, we did the overland trip through Africa. We got off the ferry and I looked around and said, I don't like it, I'm going back. So 3 months later, I was back in South Africa, and then I got, employment and stayed there for 18 years. And then the whole life that I built up fell apart, as sometimes happens. And even my two dogs, they were getting on a little bit. They've been with a long time. They both died, within a couple of months of each other. So I'd found some people Chinese people who I was friends with, and they had a school in Joburg at the time, bringing
Mhm.
people from China to learn English as a second language.
Mhm.
And they offered me an opportunity to come to China to teach English. So I
Wow.
said, okay, yeah, but where? Is it north or south? If it's the north, it's like the wilds of Canada. So they said, no,
Freezing.
it's not. Yeah, freezing and minus 40 centigrade. No way.
No,
That's not for me.
no.
Plus 40 is okay, but minus 40, no.
Yes.
So they said, no, it's not far from Vietnam. I said, okay, no problem. And they gave me a ticket, and I looked at the ticket. It says Guangzhou International Airport. That's not my final destination. So how am I going to get the next ticket? And I found out that if you buy the ticket locally, it's way, way cheaper than buying it overseas. So they
Mhm.
said there'll be somebody at the airport meeting you.
And,
Okay, I trust it. I trust it. So
and
get on the plane, and we go there. And somewhere along that way, I found out that when the plane arrives in from South Africa to Guangzhou, when it arrives in Guangzhou, I have an hour to get off the plane, go through customs, through immigration, and then get onto the plane which is going to fly to the city where I would be met by the school people.
wow.
And that's only an hour.
Sure.
So I get off, and I'm trying to get the baggage quickly and get through, and I got through with about 25 minutes to spare, and come out into the arrivals hall, and there's a gentleman there with a card with my name on it, and I go, it's me, and he says, okay, come, and he's off like a scolded cat.
Oh,
So I'm running after him, and at that time, the international and the domestic departures
Mm.
or arrivals departures at airports
Mm.
were separated by what looked like a street market.
Yeah.
And he's running through all these aisles and stalls and things like that with me in hot pursuit.
Oh,
And
wow.
then he gets to what looked like a checkout, a supermarket checkout counter. And there's a girl, a lady there, and he gives her the ticket. I says, bye-bye. And he's off again.
And you
So
don't actually speak full Chinese at this
I didn't
point.
speak Chinese. I didn't know where I was. I had, because we were running through this like a market. I hadn't even got a chance to get my bearings. I was trying to keep up with him. And I had that unconscious pressure of the plane's going to be leaving soon. So the flight attendant, she processed it, and I said, how do I get the plane? She said, it's on the runway. You have to go walk across it. So
I
I had
remember
to go
those
out onto
days.
the airport apron, walk through, and it was, I'd left Joburg in the end of August, sort of thing. So it
Mhm.
was still winter chilly, and I go into
Mhm.
Guangzhou, and it's 40 degrees plus, and I walk out there, it's like, bang, hits you hard.
Wow.
I just spent, a long time on an
Mhm.
air-conditioned plane, but hey, that's what it's like. And I got on the plane, and then we flew to the next city, which is the capital of this region, Guangxi region, called Nanning. And then there were some more people waiting for me who were going to take me on a 2-hour road trip to the school. So it all works out because you trust and believe. And it
Please
is
say
part of
it
that
again
adventure.
because you
Trust and you believe.
people, there's a life lesson there. So what happened next, Stuart? You got to the school and you didn't stay teaching. What happened?
Well, what happened was that the teaching was a pathway to my final calling, but it was also a beautiful, beautiful education. I learned so much from the students and about the students, about the way the mind works and everything else. And as it happened, I became the most popular teacher, and had the highest class retention rates, had high scores, and all this sort of thing. And what am I doing? I'm not a career teacher. I've done the TESOL
Mhm.
certificate. I'm just going into the class to teach them how to speak the English that they've learned, because they weren't taught that. They knew more about grammar than I ever knew. Sometimes I got asked by teachers or people about this grammar point, and I've never heard of it before. I've got no
Lovely.
idea what the heck they're talking about. But of course, we use the language, and they were studying
Yes.
it, so there's a difference there.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
during that process, I became more and more interested in how the mind works and how everything, fits together. And I studied NLP with John Grinder in 2012. I studied
Mhm.
Ericksonian conversational hypnotherapy at the end of that year. And somewhere in that period, I said, okay, now I know what I'm doing. Now I can use it more
Mhm.
intentionally. And
Mm.
that was beautiful because, obviously the students are getting better results, having more fun. But my main focus was on fun. And
Yes.
so much so that there was a primary school I was at and doing a class once, or a couple of classes during the week. And all the parents were complaining about me. All the students, not students, but the teachers were complaining about me. The students weren't, they were having fun, they're having a great time, but everyone else was complaining. And then come the end of term, the exam results are way higher than they've ever been. These guys, who are all complaining, said, "Okay, we want you back. We want you back. We want you back. We don't know what you're doing, but it's working."
To me, it's really significant as a little word you mentioned there, fun, because I have
Yeah,
seen with mindset work, the more fun you can have, the more focus you acquire and the more results you have.
yeah.
Was it an area where fun was encouraged or was like
Not
nose
in the
to the
classroom.
grindstone?
Not in the classroom. I mean, some of the kindergartens I've been to and primary schools I've been to, they have a little plastic tambourine. And the teacher taps it once, and the students have to sit down, and then they tap it twice, have to sit up like this, and then they have to do this, and then they do this, and they're like little robots. So
Yes.
fun is not part of that world, in the education
Mm.
system. It's about focus, study, 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 and that's the problem.
Yeah.
People are not having fun, and naturally, children play, they have
Mm-hmm.
fun, and they learn through that. You look at wild animals.
Yes.
Cheetahs, they take a live buck and they put it to the youngsters and they play with it, but they're learning how to hunt. It may not be very nice for the buck, but it's that
Mm-hmm.
natural thing. And play is one of our biggest educators. And it's a shame that we don't have more of it in the classroom. I mean,
I
when I
was,
was at school, the,
mm-hmm.
the teachers I remember the most were the most playful teachers. And they
Yes.
are the ones I got the most benefit from.
What could change that perception? Because even with the clients I work with, when I suggest fun, they're like horrified initially. It's even come down to, I heard somebody say, let's have home play rather than homework. And when I mention to people home play, they're like, look at me sideways. How have you managed to help your clients with that?
I think the one thing you have to do is lead.
Yes.
You have to have fun yourself and you have to enjoy what you're doing. And you have to bring that playful energy. I mean, that's what I took into the classroom because I fed that energy out.
Mm-hmm.
I got it back, but in larger amounts, which amplified my energy and it just built up. If you go in with a sort of negativity, it gets lower and lower and lower. So you've got to lead that way. And sometimes I don't think it helps to talk about fun. Just be silly, do silly things,
Yes.
and make it happen. I mean, this is not something I planned, but the universe planned it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime last year, maybe September, October, I was taking my two young children to kindergarten. And at the entrance to our complex, there's a little pond. And I've told the children many times to keep away from the edge. But children
Mm-hmm.
are like magnets and iron filings with water. They're
Yes.
attracted. And this one morning, I happened to step back and fall into the pond.
Oh no,
And
Stuart.
I'm
Oh
going
dear.
back, I'm cartwheeling, and I said, look at silly
Splash.
daddy, splash. And then I'm dripping from head to foot. And initially there was a big shock, on their faces. But because I'd said this and I fell in and I got out and I was making fun of myself, that
Yes.
shock went away and they had a wonderful time. It was a beautiful start to the day, but not only a beautiful start to the day, I was able to give them that lesson in such a practical, fun way because
Yes.
I'd been the fool and I didn't let my ego get in the way or anything. And then I took them to school dripping wet. So they've got all these stories to tell their friends and the teacher, and then I go home and change. And what a beautiful way. But that's what I mean. You don't talk about it. You don't necessarily have to dive in the pond backwards, but you make it happen. Just like
Try and
we're having
avoid
fun
it.
on this discussion now, you just make it happen.
Yes, you allow it. Where did you come? Because Okay, let me start again. I love how you expressed about the stars and that you walked bent over because they felt like they were pushing down on you. And I absolutely resonate with that experience. And you've gone to a very different sort of culture. So you've gone to very different cultures. How have you experienced this? What has stood out for you and where has it empowered you to grow? That's about 20 questions. Let's start with the
Yeah.
first one. What's your experience with it and what has it helped you with?
Well, I would suggest, firstly, that nothing has seemed strange.
Beautiful.
It just is. I mean, when I was traveling through Africa, you see things, you experience things, obviously, that you would never experience in your daily life. And they're wake-up calls. I mean, I think it was in Malawi. We were driving down this dirt road and it was wet and everything else. And there's a gentleman walking down the side of the road with a shoe on his head, another
Mm-hmm.
shoe in his hand, and there's two
Mm-hmm.
bananas in the shoe on his head. Now, my first thought is, what's going on here with this guy? He's crazy. I wouldn't be barefoot on that road. I'd have shoes. And then you step back and you stop judging and you
Mm-hmm.
think, okay, he's pretty smart because number one, he's used to having no shoes on. That's not a problem. But
Mm-hmm.
number two, the road's filthy. It's that red clay that stains everything. And he's
Yes.
got this lovely pair of shoes. So why wear them and ruin them in a place where, that worth more than the weight in gold? And
Yes.
secondly, African people carry things on their heads. They're so wise. I've seen people with, 50-kilo bags of cement on the head. They got the
Yes.
hands free. I mean, I'm breaking my back and everything else trying to do the same thing. I don't have that wisdom. So it
Yeah.
makes logical sense. So he's walking down there. And that's when you see it from that angle and put yourself in the other person's perspective, you actually say, okay, there's a lot of wisdom here. So lessons like that and observations like that prepare you. And when you're living, camping every single night, living by the campfire and everything else, it's a whole different perspective. Now, not everyone can do it.
Mm-hmm.
It just reminds me of a holiday we had in the Thule Block. Um, there's a small private game reserve there in the Botswana side of the Thule Block. And we had it over the New Year period. And then somebody who bought this thing came with his family, but they're the northern suburbs crowd, the Santon crowd, the whole thing. And they came there and they offloaded, and we resented their intrusion into our little privacy. But they're
Uh-huh.
offloading everything and everything else like that. And then we got a gas deep freezer. That was it. There was nothing
Yes.
else. And next thing you know, this woman pipes up. Where's the microwave?
Oh dear.
So they had frozen pies. And
Oh
I
dear.
wasn't feeling very generous because they came with this attitude that they took
Mm-hmm.
over everything. And
Mm-hmm.
they even kicked us out of our tent so they could have the best tent. So that really got me because we had one night left and that. But we had a poikie, beautiful poikie sat there bubbling away. And they came and they said, where are the pies? And, where's the microwave? And then I gave them a little bit of help with generosity, and I showed her how to make a little oven with a cast iron pot and some tin foil that she could cook most of the pies in, but it didn't work because they didn't have that connection. And they got
Yeah.
these soggy, half warmed up pies, and we got
Oh
this poikie. And
no.
people I was with, we had this beautiful poikie, and I said, "Oh, who wants more? There's lots left." And you can see the other people, their faces, the drooling and everything else. So I was
Oh,
a little
shame.
bit cruel.
Let's just explain for our audience. A poike is a stew cooked over a long, slow fire in a very heavy metal pot, and it's absolutely divine
Yeah,
when
it's
done
there's
properly.
nothing like it,
It's
is there?
soft and it's
There's nothing like it.
incredible. Yes, it's so powerful. Well done on helping them, though. Yes, I will say I have
It
seen
took a bit
people
of
go camping
doing.
with microwaves these days, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, but it's interesting how that happens. But again, it's that whole perspective. Some people take the city with them wherever they go,
Yes, yes.
and I didn't. I was able to take myself and adapt and find out ways to do things and appreciate other people's lives. So there was nothing strange. And going back to the original question, some people have asked me, well, what about moving from Africa to China? There's no
Mhm.
difference. There's absolutely no difference. It's just I'm in a different country with different languages and different customs, but it's the same basic principle. We're all people. We've all got our normal ways of doing it. And if you're open to it, then you can learn so much. And if you take it with you, like a lot of British do when they go to Spain or whatever, they want the sun with their normal food, with their normal customs, with their normal beer, everything the same as it would be back home, but just sunny instead. So they miss out, and they dismiss the local people because of it. So that's a challenge, and I don't do that. I mean, I just came here, and I don't tend to mix with expats much anyway, because a lot of them are jaundiced, if you like. They've been here too long, and they look down on people. I don't like that type of thing. I'd rather mix with with whoever is real.
Yes. It's that fear of change that comes forward. People are very afraid. And it's one of the reasons I share with my clients, I avoid stepping out of a comfort zone and rather expand it. And that's what I'm hearing you have done. You've expanded your comfort zone rather than stepping out of it. How do you feel about that?
I think your comfort zone is something you can take wherever you are, because it is. And when I say that, I don't mean taking it and try and transplant everything and put that in, but you take it with you because you're comfortable in and of yourself.
Yes.
You're comfortable with yourself. So, it is that mobile comfort zone. I mean, if you think of camping in the bushveld, and there's a lion comes to visit you at nighttime, if you're comfortable, it's a whole different experience than if you're so paralyzed with fear. It's a whole different experience, and you don't have to go to the bushveld. You don't have to have the line. You can just go from Joburg to Durban or Joburg to Cape Town, because those are different cities, different worlds. People have different thoughts. But a lot of the Joburg people, they go to Durban, they expect it to be like Joburg, with a little bit of extra power in the car, because it's in the low felt rather than it's at sea level rather than the high felt.
Yes. Yes, they
But they
go there
don't
in their
leave.
suit
They
and
just sit
can't
behind.
understand why they can't function effectively. Yes, I've been there,
Yeah.
experienced that. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you have to leave that part behind, but take your ability to be comfortable with yourself with you. And that's the secret, I think.
I love what you're saying there, if I'm hearing you correctly. Have your own safety within, because that creates safety surrounding you.
Yeah, and I think that comes from a level of trust with yourself and self-belief. And not everybody trusts themselves, and quite a lot of people have had the self-belief challenged through, various things. But once you can do that, it doesn't matter where you are, because there's always a way. There's always, you'll find that way because you have that belief and you have that trust in your abilities or even your thinking.
Yes, very much so. I'm so sad. Our time is coming to an end.
So
Well,
quick.
the podcast is coming to an end. Stuart and I are going to have many more wonderful chats. Stuart, if you could offer our audience one thing around mindset, trust, and safety, what would that be?
I think the thing that always comes to mind is, I call it AAC, and I think it should be taught in school, but unfortunately it's not, is awareness. Become aware, accept it without judgment, and then that gives you the power of choice.
Yes.
And so many people, they don't accept, they judge, or they don't have that choice because they've never become aware what's happening, and their emotions have taken over. And it's a fundamental building block of a happy life.
Yes, very much so. Wow. AAPC.
Just AAC.
AAC. I love that.
Forget ABC. That doesn't help you.
No,
AAC is more important.
very much so. That is a power. We could talk about this for hours. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, we're ending this just yet.
You notice what's happening. You accept it's happening, and then you've got a choice of how you want to go. It's so simple, so basic, but it's not always easy. Obviously,
Yes.
it has to be practiced.
Well, that is personal leadership. acknowledging what's coming up for us. Awareness is one of the keys of mindset alchemy, is intuitive awareness, listening to that inner whisper, working with it, and just seeing it. Do you feel that that awareness is what has helped you tremendously in your life with the children, with the coaching you do now, with the work you do now, and with your younger children?
Yeah, I mean, it takes some time to recognize that, but when you look back from a place, of wisdom, which you can attain sometimes only through experience and longer years, more years on under the belt. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you notice the turning points. I mean, there's one quick story about some Maasai warriors that I had, and I only got the full lesson later, much later, and it was through awareness. But awareness now of what happened then, if I'd have been aware then, it would have been different. I mean, we were in Kenya, and we were camping somewhere near the Masai Mara area, and we were sat there with our feet toasting on the campfire, pitch black night or whatever it was, and all of a sudden, 3 Maasai warriors just materialized out of nowhere, full regalia, the spears, the works, and they were friendly, so that was good. But I saw this as an opportunity to barter for a spear, which I wanted. I wanted to take that as a souvenir, and I wasn't prepared to pay the tourist prices in Nairobi, which were quite high. So I brought along an electronic calculator with me, scientific calculator, which was the bee's knees in '86 back in the UK. And I thought, okay, this is my opportunity. I'm going to barter. And I took it to the one guy and I showed it him. He took it out. He knew how to use a calculator. He played with it. So, it's beautiful. It's wonderful, he said. And then carefully put it back in the box and gave it back. He said, but what use is it to me?
Very powerful.
And, that was the thing. I shrank and I disappeared because I was too full of my own ego and everything else. And I hadn't realized, not only that it would be no use to him, but he's in the middle of nowhere. That's his home, looking after the cattle. What happens if he took it and he needs a new battery?
Yes.
Where does he get it from? There's no shops, there's no supermarkets, there's nothing. But I didn't even think of that. So I shrank away, became, silly, like we do. And he was so noble, so honorable about it, the way he did it. And that took me by surprise and made me even worse. But many years later, I'm so grateful to him for that lesson about value and everything else. And if I'd have been aware at the time, I could have stepped out of myself and said, okay, I don't want to shrink away. I'm going to accept I've been a fool and this wasn't a good interaction from my point of view, but I can apologize and I can build a relationship from there. But I did. Went into reaction.
Yes, I hear you. That is I'm just seeing my mind is going 4 million things. And I was thinking, well, a calculator wouldn't help feed his family. And it would, that is just so powerful.
But I didn't think of that because I was locked in my world.
And I see that so many times. It's happened to me as well, especially around children, because children are very literal. And I see that they are very perceptive and their filters are not yet in place. And I've also seen it when people come to Africa, they have so many preconceived ideas. They forget that there's some very different realities here.
Yeah.
Just as they're different realities
have a wisdom of their own, don't they?
Yeah, that is so powerful. Oh, Stuart, this has been so awesome. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. It's always exciting to share. And I grow every time I share because I start taking more of the lessons that I've learned on board for myself. So that's wonderful as well.
Well, I definitely have learned from your Maasai warrior story. It's given me a whole different direction of thinking for something I'm putting together. So thank you so much for that.
Wonderful.
Stuart, where can people get hold of you if they would like to work with you and connect with you?
The best way is either LinkedIn, and obviously you can give me the profile address, and my email is Stuart, Stuart, @spg .bz. I specifically got a very short one, so it's easy
Love
to
it.
remember.
I will put it in the show notes as
Yeah.
well, people. And I highly encourage you to follow Stuart and learn from his wisdom. There's a tremendous amount here to help us catalyze all those past experiences into the present so that we can create a better future. Stuart, again, thank you for staying up late. Thank you
It's my
so much
pleasure.
for joining us, and
Yeah.
we'll chat soon. Everybody,
Yeah, and
bye-bye.
I would just like to say, just take that fresh outlook on life. Just step outside of whatever and just have a fresh outlook. And then you'd be surprised the changes and the beauty you can find within yourself and your situation. And thank you so much for everything.
That is so beautiful. It comes down to perspective. I still love what you said about trust. And we could talk for another 3 hours. People, I'm going to hit the goodbye button. Bye-bye.